All right, how did the Jacobins rise to power during the French Revolution? And what events or conditions helped them gain control of the government? All right, so yesterday we mentioned about the moderates, what they wanted, what kind of government they wanted, the Jacobins, what kind of government they wanted, and then on the far right of the spectrum here, when it comes to some of the traditionalists, right? What we know as conservatives, right? Or some of the religious leaders, what kind of government they wanted, right? There was a debate. Yeah, there was a debate, discussion, and throughout time, well, the Jacobins looked like they came out on top here. They did. And that's going to bring on this reign of terror. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about the reign of terror yesterday. Today we're going to dive deeper into it and move on to Napoleon, the rise of Napoleon. There you go. I'll give you guys some time. All right, here we go. Here we go. So, as we were talking about this revolution, right? What is France's Independence Day again? What was that called? Jason. Bastille Day. Bastille Day. Good job. Good. Now, what was it, Bastille? What was it? Naomi. Yeah, good job, right? It's an armory where all the weapons are. If you got the weapons, that means, well, you have power. So, Bastille Day, known as a turning of the tide, a new day here in France, and July 14th, right? As France is transitioning to a new government, right? And yeah, we mentioned a little bit about the Constitution that they created, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens, and how they're declaring their new independence, their new country of France, right? How they're going to try to get rid of the old system. All right. Anyway, we did talk too about the March on Versailles. What do we know about the March of Versailles? March on Versailles. What was this? We're gonna go ahead.
6,000 women mad about the fact that they couldn't get food, therefore they ransacked well, not really ransacked, but made the voices heard and hopefully got their food.
Yeah, good job, right? So, as a mother, can imagine if your children are starving, you're gonna do anything in your power to make sure you can put food on the table. So there they go. They march on to Versailles, miles and miles away from Paris, and they demand for food. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, they're realizing after these events that we just talked about, the storming of the Bastille, when we talked about the assembly of the National Assembly, right? Weird. Anyway, when it comes to the March on Versailles, they're losing their power, right? They're losing their power. So, for the people here of France, you can see how this is going in a direction, and it's going to change the game. And where Louis, well, he might flee, right? Which we did talk a little bit about that yesterday. So he did flee, and they did capture him, right? Right, they captured them, and they still were thinking about instituting a what kind of monarchy? What kind of monarchy? The moderates really wanted this, right? Austin? Okay, a limited monarchy. All right, what's that called though? We had a Venn diagram when we talked about the English Civil War. England has one of these here, Audrina. Yeah, good job, a constitutional monarchy. So as they're assembling in this unicameral legislature, in this one house, right, we have the moderates right in the middle, and they're saying, hey, England has a pretty good government. It's representative of the people. They have a constitutional monarchy, right? It works out for them. And then on the far left, who's on the far left? What power, what group here? And this all alludes to the reign of terror, right? Calvin? The Jacobins, yep, good job. Do they want an executive? Meaning, do they want a figurehead, a leader, a king? No, they don't want a constitutional monarchy either. All right, that's still showing that this king is up on a pedestal. They're like, no, we don't want that at all. We want a representative government of the people. And you can see how, as you're appealing to the people, they're like, yeah, you know what? We don't want a king anymore. Right? We saw what happened with Louis XIV. We saw all these divine right monarchs for so long hold all this power. Remember the first and second estate? These groups of people up on their pedestal for so long, not paying taxes, we're done with them. Right? So you can see how the Jacobins really gain a lot of support by the French people. They're like, yeah, we don't want any type of executive branch, so to speak. We don't want any king or monarch at all, even in a constitutional monarch. All right, and that's how they gain power, right? They appeal to the needs of the people. They're talking about the one of this revolution when it comes to liberty, fraternity, equality, right? All right, then finally, on the far right, remember how we got the far right, far left? They just sat on these sides of the room. But anyway, who's on the very far right here? Who we got? Far right. Audrina. Okay, yeah, these traditionalists, or we know as conservatives, right? These religious leaders, they're saying, hey, you can't totally just change everything here, right? For France, I mean, we are still a very strong power. We have the strongest land military. And we just should just totally change everything, right? There's still some good things here that we have, right? Let's not just totally erase all of it. We have all of our history, all of our government structure. And yeah, they still somewhat supported the absolute monarchy, which you can imagine why people didn't vote for that, right? They wanted this total change. All right, anyway, so that's where the Jacobins continue this movement here and get elected in to this unicameral legislature, where they're going to have full reign, full power. All right, here are your terms for today. All right, I'd like to get to this today. If not, I mean, it is what it is, but I like to keep it rolling, keep it rolling. So we got Napoleon, the Directory, coup d'etat. All right, there you go. There you go. So tomorrow we'll continue. I'd like to talk more about Napoleon. Then on Monday into Tuesday, I'd like to talk about the Napoleonic Wars, how Europe's going to be reshaped. The French Empire is going to take over now. And then I'd like to mention more about his legacy then on Tuesday. And if we do have some time, we'll have a review on Tuesday. Get you ready for the test on Wednesday. So I know I've been moving pretty quick, but keep it up here. Again, I don't want you guys to have any work over Christmas break. All right, there you go. Give you guys some time. All right, so these terms, we're going to talk about them today, hopefully. If not, definitely tomorrow. But we're going to move to Napoleon, his rise to power, as this reign of terror is just getting out of control, as this chaos is leaking all throughout France, and, well, the fear of it throughout all of Europe. So I know I mentioned a little bit yesterday with some of these wars here that are going on for France as they're going through their own revolution, right? So you can imagine there's Great Britain, there's Austria, there's Prussia, even Russia, right? They're all looking at France in this weakened state, right? Here's their opportunity, right? Here's their opportunity to maybe kick them while they're down, try to take some of their territory, take some of their land, right? And make sure that this strong military power in Western Europe, well, never comes back around again. So as France is going through this revolution, they're still fighting these wars, costly wars all throughout Europe and in some of their territories overseas, in the Middle East, moving into Asia, moving to parts of Africa, right? So we'll mention about how this is going to transition and where we'll see a popular general, right, gain support, gain power throughout France. All right, so like I mentioned, we talked about how the Jacobins really persuaded the people to vote for them, right? To move in their direction here, accept their political ideology moving forward, that they want a representative government, right? And you can imagine a lot of people like, yeah, we want this. Okay, if we're going to go with this revolution, we want to go to the full extent. We want to make sure that everybody has the same government, that we're going to have actually a government for the people, by the people. Get rid of that executive branch, right? We don't need a king. We don't need a constitutional monarchy even, right? Totally get rid of it. And again, a lot of people were sour over Louis the 16th spending, right? Louis the 14th spending. I mean, way back in the day, I get it. And this constant debt of, the king when it comes to the Palace of Versailles and these massive parties that went through. All right, so when we mention about the monarchy here, the Jacobins, as they gain into power, there is a time period, right? A brief time period, 2, 3, 4 years, where the Jacobins reign supreme. And during that time, they've known it as the what? What do they call this time period? Jason, the reign of terror. Good job. For the Jacobins, they move in a direction of chaos, of anarchy, of power, right? Even though they told the people that they weren't going to, infringe on their rights or their values or their liberties, they totally do, right? They totally do. So when it comes to politics, you got to be careful, especially when you're looking at maybe some of the extremes of the political spectrum, right? Here in this case, for the far left, the Jacobins, right, they push for this democracy, this embracement of democracy, and people looked at it and said, "Yeah, let's do this." And as that power got to some of their heads, right, and this party itself, the Jacobins, well, they just abused it totally. All right, so the Jacobins, as they gain power, they're not going to accept a constitutional monarchy. No, they don't want moderation at all, right? Let alone an absolute monarch. They're going to totally get rid of the king and the queen. So what do? They convict Louis the 16th and they say, your time's done. Your time's over, right? So what do? Well, they bring Louis and Marie Antoinette shortly after and chop off their heads for all to see. And this is the end, again, of the monarchy here in France, this divine right leadership, totally gone, totally gone. So if you're cutting off the king's head, that means anybody, and I mean anybody, is free game. Meaning the Jacobins, they'll come after you, even if they hit up on the smallest hint that you're not sympathetic towards their causes, right? If you're not fully embracing the Jacobins' political ideology, well, you might as well be dead. And through this time of the Reign of Terror, a short 1-2 years, they executed over 17,000 people. 17,000, right? So the guillotine, right, being that symbol of the French Revolution, this Reign of Terror, this bloody mess that's happening, it really starts off. It occurs. All right, so as they're chopping off heads, there's a lot of sources out there that, well, as you strike down over and over and over again, what happens to a blade once you use it constantly? It gets dull, right? So there's many sources out there when they're dropping this guillotine down, this massive blade. Sometimes it won't fully cut through the head, right? So you can imagine this coming down, boom, slamming down on someone's neck, and then the head just doesn't fly off. It's just kind of dangling there, holding on by just the slightest bit of skin, or maybe even their spine. So what would they do? Well, the head didn't go flying off. I guess we'll raise that blade up again and drop it down. and everybody would be up in cheers. Yeah, we're killing off these traitors. We're killing off these people that want to try to bring back the crown. Yeah, sometimes too, they'd have this massive hatchet, right, I guess, or this massive axe and finish the job off, but it got pretty darn violent. It got pretty darn chaotic. Right, also the Jacobins, what did they do to control the people? What did they do? Did they control the newspapers? Yeah, right, censorship at its finest. And is that very liberty-like? Is that good when it comes to people's freedoms? No, right? So they censored the newspapers, making sure people only saw what they wanted them to see, right? They didn't want to see any type of ideas that could maybe bring them back to moderation, right? The Jacobins are in full power mode here at this point. Also, what they do to the calendar? What about Christianity? What they do? You guys remember? I don't know if I talked about this, did I? Must have landed, go ahead. Yeah, good job, right? So a 10-day week. Wow. Wow. So 10-day week so that they could maybe get people to forget about when Sunday is. So totally get rid of the church, totally get rid of Christianity. Again, that's a sign of the old order. They don't want to embrace that anymore, right? They don't want people to go back to this old habit, this old way. Even though religion is a pretty good institution for people, let's face it. So the Jacobins really ruled in this chaotic way, anarchical way. Anyway, so as we talked, another thing here with the Jacobins, as France is going through the revolution, this bloody revolution, arresting over 40,000 people during this short 1-2 year frame and executing about 20,000 people with the guillotine. They're also at war, right? So as they're at war here, right, Prussia, Austria, the rivals here, France, in Europe, right, what we know the Holy Roman Empire, Russia even, Great Britain, they see this as an opportunity. France is weak, right? They're going through a revolution. They're fighting internally, right? They see this chaos here with the reign of terror. So here's their opportunity to kick them while they're down, right? Here's this opportunity to take their territories away from them as they're fighting, right, with themselves. And that's exactly what happens. Is that going to fuel maybe someone down the line to get back at them? Yeah, that guy's going to be Napoleon, right? So we'll mention about that here soon. Also, Napoleon, right? He's fighting in these wars overseas. So he kind of lucked out if you think about it, right? Luckily, he wasn't here in France, I guess, for him, because chances are he might have got his head cut off. Who knows? So it was actually safer being at war, if you can imagine that. It was actually safer being right at war in other territories, in other lands, right? In Africa, here in Egypt, where he was fighting a lot, rather than being at home in France. So I think that's kind of odd and unimaginable for some people, but with that reign of terror, you never know what could happen. And it literally became like a witch hunt, right? They would have these spies sitting in line in the bread lines. And again, if you weren't sympathetic towards the cause, off with your head. Or if you just didn't like someone, right? You didn't like someone. Brody, yeah, I think we simulated you getting your head chopped off yesterday, right? Okay, yeah, so there's Brody. If I just didn't see eye to eye with him one day, hey, he said about bringing back the monarchy. Should we do it again? No, we're not going to do it. But we cut off his head. All right, who led this reign of terror? Robespierre. It's one of your terms from yesterday, Maximilien Robespierre. When you think about the reign of terror, this is the guy that led all this chaos, right? He was the one who was censoring the newspaper. He was censoring the media, right? He was going after people for these ideas that maybe they want the monarchy back. And let's face it, after the reign of terror, some people were like, hey, it was kind of stable a bit, right, with the monarchy. Right? Yeah, we might have been starving on the streets, but we didn't have to worry about our heads getting rolled off too. So maybe that's something we should think about, huh? So when we get to Napoleon, that's why some people just said, you know what, just make him emperor. Just make him emperor, right? And that's where the revolution kind of lost its power, I guess, lost its motion. Anyway, with the Jacobins, like I mentioned, they controlled everything. And the guillotine, I already mentioned about that, so you can see where that's rolling. But Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre, he was the voice of this reign of terror. He was the voice of the Jacobins and trying to control all of France here through this power struggle. And that power did get to his head for sure. I tell you about what happened here with Maximilien Robespierre towards the end of the reign of terror. When people said, hey, enough's enough. All right, 17,000 people getting killed by the guillotine. That's let's relax here. Did I tell you what happened to him? All right, so he saw his own fate. He saw kind of ironically his own head getting chopped off. So towards the end of the Reign of Terror, people were in fear, people were in terror of what was going to happen next, right? So with Robespierre, he lost, well, the will of the people, right? So as this was really getting out of hand, people were like, enough's enough, right? We can't be just killing people left and right over hearsay. There's no judicial process. We didn't want this type of revolution, right? We wanted liberty and freedoms, equality, yeah, but not this chaos, not this anarchy, not this bloodshed. So when push comes to shove, they grabbed Robespierre and said, you're done, right? And the only way to deal with him is by cutting his own head off. So the sources say that he tried to commit suicide as they were gathering him up. And as he took this gun from his pocket, he tried to shoot himself in the head, but he was too low and he shot his jaw off, right? So as he shot his jaw off, which some people say that maybe it was someone else trying to kill him, trying to shoot him in the head and maybe hit him in the jaw. No one really knows for sure. Well, let's just go with that. He tried to commit suicide. So he shoots himself in the jaw, and here's that voice of the Reign of Terror gone, right? So ironically, this person that used to talk quite a bit about the heretics, quite a bit about the problems here in France, this voice of the Reign of Terror, this guy can't even talk anymore, right? Blew off his own jaw. And this was happening in this assembly building, this political building. And then rumor has it too, he's on the second story. He's trying to flee the scene. So you can imagine there he is bleeding from his jaw. It's pretty much blown off. And he jumps from the second story, lands down on his legs, and breaks both of his legs. So you can imagine the excruciating pain, right? Not only that, he brought to France through that Reign of Terror, but what he's facing here in his final, like, couple hours. So they gather him up, and the next day, well, you can imagine he's bandaged over with his jaw, right? Kind of bleeding out and just holding on by the slightest bit. And he kind of murmured something out. No one really knows for sure. They just say he gargled, right? He gargled this blood out before the guillotine came striking down on his own head. So what a symbolic end for Robespierre, right? I mean, he killed close to 20,000 people that guillotine, and here he is seeing his own fate. And he couldn't even say his last words because his jaw was blown off. Is that crazy, Teeter? All right, so Committee of Public Safety, we talked about this group here that was helping assist the Jacobins, that helped when it came to censoring the newspapers, when it came to really spying on the people of France. And again, when you think about the liberty of the French Revolution, the ideas of freedom and opportunity, well, you can see how the Jacobins really abused that power. They went down this wrong path, and they made this revolution just really sick and twisted. So the Committee of Public Safety is this group, right? This establishment that helped the Jacobins try to find out who the enemies truly were within the country and outside the country. So again, France is fighting it out with a lot of their rivals in Europe at this time as they're going through a revolution, and they're trying to purge all of the enemies of France itself within its own borders. So the Committee of Public Safety is kind of like, do you remember the oppression, what we mentioned about with Ivan the Terrible? Kind of like this group, this paramilitary group that spied on the people, censored newspapers, that tried to eradicate Christianity from France and try to fully end this backwards movement of the French Revolution, right? This counter-revolutionary tactics. So this group, again, well, you can see it really wasn't providing public safety, was it? No, as they're arresting 40,000 people, as they're executing 17,000 people, well, that name is very not true, right? Definitely not true. All right, last thing. So as the Reign of Terror comes to a close, as Maximilien Robespierre is, well, no longer around, as he gets his head chopped off, well, now France has to come up with a new government. Oh, a new one? Yeah. So at this point, at this time, this is their third government change. Third in a short amount of years of the revolution. So you can see how this really wasn't going down the same path of the American Revolution. Right? The French Revolution definitely took this chaotic path. And as they come up with and establish this new government, they decide to somewhat create an oligarchy. You guys know what an oligarchy is? Anybody? Oh, go ahead, Wyatt. Yeah, good job. So they decided to go with 5 executives, meaning 5 leaders, okay? That were voted on by the people. Okay, so they would vote these 5 leaders in, and it's not like you have, let's say, like one president here or one king. There's 5 of them. And they try to direct France in a better direction. One where it was stable, one where they could enforce the law, but not abuse it like the Jacksons did. So this oligarchy was supposed to bring stability to France. Well, like anything, as you're adding more of a bureaucracy here in France, well, some of these bureaucrats get corrupted. Yeah, right? Some of these politicians here might be acting in their own favors, right? And their own demands, rather than the people. So this directory really wasn't working too well for France. And again, they're at war with a lot of the rivals. The gas are going through this revolution. So you can imagine that France is just really in a periled state, in a corrupted state at this moment, at this time. And they're still looking for someone to come in and save the day. And that someone would be Napoleon. All right, so as the failures of the directory are happening pretty quick, as people are looking at the corruption of these 5 leaders of the directory, right, they want someone that's going to bring stability. And that guy is a successful general that's fighting a lot of these wars in these territories all around, literally the world, but mostly here in Egypt. That will be Napoleon. All right, so this is going to be the rise of Napoleon. Okay, guys, I'm going to shift here to the other presentation, so you guys can find that in modules. It's right there at the top of this module. Okay, you can find the presentation right underneath this one. And here we go. So let's just talk a little bit about Napoleon. All right, so Napoleon, here he is. Here he is, the savior of the revolution, conqueror of Europe. So I know what you're thinking. Why would France try to get rid of a monarch, a divine right leader, and embrace an emperor, right? Why would they do that? That revolution seemed like it failed, didn't it? Well, for a lot of people, they look at that and say, yeah, it did. But Napoleon was a different type of emperor. Napoleon was a different type of leader, right? He still wanted to try to institute the ideas of the revolution, not only here in France, but all of Europe, okay? So when people try to critique him, people try to look at his leadership and say, you know what? He was this bloodthirsty emperor. He was this bloodthirsty general that tried to take over all of Europe. There's a lot of deaths, a lot of killing. Yeah, there were. But he was trying to wake Europe up, right? He was trying to bring these Enlightenment ideas to the rest of these countries that were constantly at France's throat. So in other words, I mean, you can look at it and kind of argue in both directions. Right? Was he the savior of the revolution? Kinda. Was he this bloodthirsty emperor? Yeah, kind of, right? So that always gets talked about with Napoleon. And with anything, he does institute a lot of good things, but also a lot of bad things. All right, anyway, early years. So where was he born? He was born actually here in Corsica, right? Which is this small island here right off the coast of Italy. But as you can see, well, it was controlled by France. He was technically French then. So he was actually from he was born from the Italian nobles, meaning they were wealthy. Okay, they were able to afford a lot of things, especially when it comes to putting their son into military training, into military strategies, right? And to make sure that he understands the newest and latest forms of military tactics. So at a very young age, Napoleon was primed for this position, becoming a strong general. Okay. And as you can see, at the age of 10, he enrolled in this French military school. So even though, as you can see, it's pretty darn close to Italy, it technically is an area of France. So one thing to note is that because he was from this small island, a lot of people in France viewed him as this weak leader. It's like, oh, he had kind of this like dialect, this language barrier in a way with the French language. It's not like a pure tone of it, right? So it's almost like he had somewhat of kind of like, I don't want to say it's a speech issue, a speech problem, but somewhat of a twist to it, right? An accent of his French language. So a lot of people critique him, okay, especially the British. And we'll talk about the British, and they make up a lot of these fake stories about him, especially about him being very short. they try to depict him as this small little man that was about like 5'2". In all reality, he was 5'6". So I got 1 inch on, 1 inch on. But in all reality, he was average height, right? Average height for the time. So in other words, Britain did a pretty good job of trying to propaganda, trying to make him look weaker than what he really was. And as you can see here, the next slide, that's what it's talked about. So yeah, he would oftentimes get made fun of because of his accent, right? His Corsican accent wasn't fully embracing this French language. Like I mentioned, his height. Okay. There's a movie that came out last year. Anybody see it? Napoleon? Anybody? No? Okay. It was okay. It was pretty good. But I was really hoping it would have really emphasized more on his military brilliance, but they focused more on the British propaganda of Napoleon. Right? They focused more on his height. They focused more on his weird relationship with his woman Josephine. He later divorces her, but anyway, they really try to pick fun and make fun of Napoleon and depict him as this weak character, this weak leader. In all reality, he was pretty darn strong, right? We haven't seen an empire quite like France's, right? A European power, a European empire since the Roman Empire was around. So in all reality, he was a pretty strong leader, a very strong leader. But you can imagine, right? The victors in the end were the British, and they're going to pick their enemies as weaker, as lower than. All right, so like I mentioned, during the French Revolution, well, where was Napoleon? So much of the revolution, Napoleon was fighting. Oh, sorry, there you go, my bad. Jeez, my bad, sorry. Gonna slip back here today, though. I mean, yeah, okay. I like the flow, though. It's good. All right, so the savior of the revolution. So where was Napoleon as the revolution was kicking off? Well, he was fighting in other territories. He was fighting these wars against these other European powers, like England, right? He was fighting in a lot of areas in Egypt. Why Egypt? Well, Napoleon thought this would be a great way to try to cause a lot of problems, a lot of issues for England to get to India, right? This travel route here to India. So he thought if you control the eastern side of the Mediterranean, well, you can control the goods coming from Asia, right? And you can be a thorn in the side of England as long as possible. So in other words, he was really making a name for himself and becoming a very successful and powerful general during the time of the revolution. Like I mentioned before, it was probably good that he wasn't in France, right? It was actually more chaotic there. It was actually bloodier in France itself than actually on the battlefield, duking it out with a lot of France's rivals. So I know it sounds weird, but it was safer at war than at home in France because that reign of terror was really getting under. All right. So like I mentioned, he was fighting Austrians, the Prussians, English, everywhere, and making a name for himself. Again, the people really supported him. The troops that are on the battlefield with him realized what kind of brilliance he was, what kind of military mind he was. All right. And as you can see, he does come back after a defeat in Egypt. He actually makes it back before, well, people can catch wind of it. And as he makes it back to France from Egypt, right? People really don't know about his defeat just yet. But he comes back a hero, he comes back a savior, and he looks at this directory and says, well, this is not the direction that France should go, right? We should actually try to lead with a better example. We want to try to bring on, right, more of these revolutionary ideas rather than going down this direction of corruption that the directory is bringing to France. So in other words, which we'll talk more tomorrow, I know we're running low on time, he throws a coup. Right, he's a part of this process of overthrowing the directory and bringing on a change to France to end its corruption and really fulfill the needs of the revolution of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So we'll mention that tomorrow. And yeah, he becomes an emperor. So France just replaces a monarch with a reign of terror to an emperor. Crazy. All right, there you go. Savior of the revolution, Napoleon. Hero.